But do you really have what it takes to actually say, I was the bad influence? I was the one exerting the peer pressure. I was the one that coerced others. Can you? Now that's real honesty.
Be honest.
No more lies, you understand? No more lies.
Thank you for being so honest.
Hello and welcome back to Sobriety Made Simple. My name is Timothy Martin and today we're going to be discussing honesty. Why is honesty so important in recovery from alcohol? Here's a few reasons. It helps in relationships shattered by addiction. It also helps maintain consistent progress throughout your recovery. It helps build integrity by building trust in interpersonal relationships. It minimizes the chances of relapse. And it also helps break the bonds of addiction. If you're trying to rebuild a life after addiction, you need to pay particular attention to honesty. You will need not only be truthful with others, but most importantly, you need to be truthful with yourself. Failure to establish honesty may mean that you will more likely be at risk of relapse. It could also mean that you're living a life of recovery that is not very fulfilling. And that could lead to what's called the dry drunk syndrome, which I will discuss in an upcoming video. Most people who abuse alcohol usually live a life that involves plenty of dishonesty. That means your drinking has probably brought you into conflict with many people. In order to avoid such conflicts, you lie. When your boss wants to know why you're not at work, you might claim that you picked up some type of stomach bug, for example. Anybody out there guilty of that? I know I am.
Liar, liar, pants on fire.
And then the avalanche of lies I had to tell to cover up for the first one. And then I might actually have to act sick at work when everybody knows I went out and got wasted. The only one I'm fooling is me. The life of a drinker tends to involve telling one lie after another, and then more lies to cover up the previous lies. But the most damaging of all lies is the lies that we tell ourselves. We have all self-deceived and have been in denial in order to keep abusing alcohol. The evidence of the deception caused by addiction is usually plain for everybody else to see, except us. We are able to hide this truth from ourselves. It's only when the evidence of the destructiveness of the behavior becomes too overwhelming to ignore that we will develop a willingness to change. Honesty is what finally leads people to recovery. That is usually what keeps them there. What starts dishonesty in the first place? There are a number of reasons that people who drink behave dishonestly. They fear the consequences of their actions, so they lie in order to protect themselves from those consequences. Also, lying becomes a habit. The more people do it, the more they are likely to continue to do it in the future. It's easy to slip into a habit of lying until dishonesty just becomes almost an automatic response. Also, dishonesty can produce desirable outcomes, both socially and economically. Therefore, it is tempting to use it as a tool to fulfill desires. The problem is that long-term consequences of dishonesty are usually very negative. Also, the drinker has a tendency to lie even without realizing it. It's because they are so self-deluded that they are unable to see the truth. And even though someone might stop drinking and start living a life in recovery, honesty is still a hard thing because the dishonest nature is so ingrained in their habits. All right, some of the dangers of dishonesty in recovery. If you start lying in recovery, it can trigger a relapse because it means that the individual is returning to old and ineffective coping strategies in order to live life. The most common reasons why people relapse after a period of sobriety is because they, one, become stuck in recovery. This often happens because they have stopped being honest with themselves and other people. They feel unwilling to face a challenge on the path before them, so they try to hide in denial. No further progress can occur until the individual can clearly acknowledge what the problem is and be willing to take action to remedy the situation. 2, if friends and family find out about the dishonesty, it can destroy any progress that has been made in rebuilding relationships. 3, working in a real recovery program requires a person to be rigorously honest. If the individual begins to behave dishonestly, then they will be unable to benefit from recovery. No self-deception. Remember that. 4, dishonesty can lead to a feeling of guilt afterwards. The individual who is dealing with too much guilt in recovery can find it hard to discover real happiness, and that could lead to possible relapse. 5, it was the failure of the individual to be honest with themselves that kept them trapped in addiction. They have allowed self-deception to once again take hold of their lives. They are likely to question the value of sobriety and the need to refrain from alcohol. 6. Honesty allows for healing of the individual and the people closest to them. If people continue to be dishonest, it means that this healing cannot take place. Okay, how do you increase honesty in your recovery? One key is to break away from dishonesty, to admit that it has occurred. Own up to your dishonesty. It makes it harder for you to be dishonest in the future. Developing honesty is like building up muscles. The more people do it, the more honest they can become. A good idea is to also keep a journal. It is useful to track behavior. It gives the person the opportunity to look back on their day, to look for any examples of dishonest behavior. Journaling also reduces the risk of becoming caught up in self-delusion, because things appear quite clear when they are written on paper. You also have to value honesty. If you don't value honesty, you're not going to put a lot of effort into living a life that is built upon it. Therefore, it is vital that the individual has a clear understanding of the importance of honesty and the dangers of being dishonest. Here are a few of the reasons why it is dangerous to be dishonest in recovery. It's easy for people to play down the significance of certain lies. You can justify the telling of white lies. While there are many times a person might lie, they can tell themselves it was the lesser of two evils. It's not a good idea to view any type of dishonesty in recovery as acceptable. Ideally, the individual should be aiming for complete honesty, although that's very unlikely that that will be achieved. So you can see why honesty is definitely important, especially lying to yourself. If you don't admit there's a problem, then you can't work on it. There's no way to try to fix it because it doesn't exist. Please think about this. I know I felt a lot better about myself when I was willing to throw it all on the table and take a look at what I was, all the bad and the good, to be honest about your strengths and your weaknesses. That way you have a better understanding of who you are as a person. How much can you take? What do you need help with? It's going to be a clearer path, and you'll get to know yourself a lot better. Don't be in denial. It was tough for me to face up to a lot of things that I had done when I was drinking. But I just went through it, and I felt a lot better afterwards. Now, in some cases, I didn't. I will never feel good about some of the decisions I made when I was drinking, and that's just part of being honest. You know, folks, it's not all sunny blue skies afterwards. It might actually be pretty tough to live with some of the decisions that you made when you were drinking. You know, so many people will say, oh, I was coerced into doing it, or I went along with the crowd, or it was peer pressure, I folded. But do you really have what it takes to actually say, I was the bad influence? I was the one exerting the peer pressure. I was the one that coerced others. Can you? Now that's real honesty. I had to admit to that. Doing that meant a step forward in recovery, to have to deal with those ugly things. Okay? How far are you willing to go? Ask yourself that. You're going to be the only one who knows this. You don't have to admit it to the world. But it's a step in the right direction, because that way you have a clearer picture of who you are as a person. And that is going to make your life alcohol-free so much easier. It is. Hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, okay? Hit that thumbs up button for me and subscribe if you haven't already, okay? Hang in there. Be honest. Remember, you got this. Bye.
Thank you for being honest.